What's going on, everybody? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and lots of big news coming out of, well, everywhere today. So we got 3 videos, so buckle up and let's get going with the first one. The first one is arguably the biggest piece of news out there, because Sony, and specifically Mark Cerny, who is the lead architect, the lead hardware architect at the PlayStation division at Sony, has come out and finally revealed the first details on the PlayStation 5. Now, we all knew the PS5 was eventually coming. I suppose this is technically the first proper announcement. It's not going to be out in 2019, so we're probably looking at Christmas 2020. But Cerny has lifted some details about the PS5, some of which are very, very good. And, well, we'll get into them in details now in a second. So, first off, what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to read through the features and the reveals and all as well. And then we're going to go back and we're going to break down each point individually, so I can get a proper detail of each little paragraph, each little point. So first up, we'll go with what's going to be inside this hardware. It's going to be a CPU based on AMD's Ryzen chip. It's going to be based on the 7nm Zen 2 architecture, and it's going to be 8 cores. Now, chances are it's actually 8 physical cores, which is a good thing, but we'll get back to that in more detail a little bit later. The GPU is going to be a custom variant of Radeon's Navi family. And this is especially interesting. Again, I'll get to this now in a minute, but it's purported to have extra features like some sort of basic ray tracing, as well as the audio capabilities will allow 3-dimensional audio. Don't worry, we'll get to the whole story on all of this now in a minute. They've also said when it comes to PSVR, that PSVR is an important part of the PlayStation 5. The current PS4 VR headset will work going forward. It's unclear if there's going to be a new next generation headset or a refreshed version, or what the benefits of the additional horsepower inside the PS5 will do for existing VR games. But again, we'll get all into that a little bit later. And yes, they confirmed the console will have a disc drive, and obviously it will support the PSN and digital downloads. I mean, why wouldn't it? Sony's PSN in 2018 made more money than Nintendo's whole company. So that's right, just in digital downloads and digital content alone, in 1 year, they made more money than an entire competitor's company. So why would they get rid of that? I mean, come on, that's just silly. I guess it helps that they just reconfirmed it, but you know what I mean. Anyway, moving along, and this is a very, very big, interesting one to me. Again, we'll get to the details later. But the PlayStation 5 is going to have a solid-state drive inside it. So gone are the old, slow, mechanical hard drives. Now, there's positives and negatives to SSDs, which we'll get to now in a moment. But they've also mentioned 8K resolution support. Now, realistically, when they say 8K resolution support, I'm putting this into 2 things, which we'll get to later. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see, Cerny. We'll see. And last but not least, all the rumours and filings and patents and whatnot have actually come out to be true. The PS5 will have backwards compatibility with just the PlayStation 4. Not a bad thing. Again, we'll get into it in much bigger detail now in a moment. So let's break each and every one of these points down individually. We're going to start with the CPU, the one that's based on AMD's Ryzen 2nd Gen 7nm technology. As I predicted a little while back that it would use some sort of Ryzen chip, even if it is a basic one. But the difference that you console guys are going to see just on the CPU alone is absolutely insane. I have said this multiple times over all these years, that there's no proper way for me to accurately portray just how bad the PS4 CPU and the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One, Xbox One S and Xbox One X, because they're all technically the same CPU, but all those CPU families, I have no possible proper way just how I can accurately say how far behind that CPU was, even at launch. These consoles launched in 2013, and the PS4 and Xbox One CPU, performance-wise, was something extremely bad from like 2008, 2009. It's an absolute nothing short of a miracle that we can play any of these games whatsoever on PS4 and Xbox One using these CPUs. There's so much wrong with this. Or at least what was wrong with those CPUs. But the difference you will see with a Ryzen CPU is light years ahead. It is insane the difference you would see from the CPU alone. If you were to say somehow put in a Ryzen CPU into an Xbox One X or PS4 Pro, for example, your frame rates would absolutely skyrocket. Fundamental game design would be entirely different because it's not hamstrung by that crappy piece of shit Jaguar CPU. Just to give you a quick example, a mid-range 2012 Intel CPU is still massive, immense, almost innumerable leagues ahead of even the Xbox One X CPU, despite it releasing like 7 years later. But anyway, that's always a good thing for everyone involved. That hopefully at least anyway, none of this stuff will be hamstrung and held back by CPU limitations. Now, it is entirely possible that that could happen because it's probably going to be some sort of custom one, but the chances of it having issues are significantly lower, and the general performance you get out of it will be significantly higher. Now, moving on to the Navi GPU, this one is very, very interesting to me as a PC hardware guy, because while they said it's not coming out in 2019, which makes perfect sense, the fact that it'll probably be out in 2020 is kind of pretty much telltale by this. Because AMD's Radeon Navi family GPUs aren't even out yet. They're tipped to be coming out at some point, or at least announced properly at some point this summer. So it would make sense that they could have one going forward. Now, I will always say this as a warning. We all know that console equivalents of desktop GPUs are obviously still lower end, so that's something you have to take on board, as well as the fact that AMD hasn't had a competitive desktop GPU since the mid-2000s. I still think you're going to get decent performance out of this, especially with console level optimization. But just remember, guys, you're going to have Sony, you're going to have whatever's in the Xbox One X, you're going to have AMD, you're going to have all these media outlets all saying the same thing. Oh, these consoles are light years ahead of even a top-end gaming PC. They said the same thing in 2013 when the consoles were coming out then, and guess what? My 2011 computer, which was 2 years old by then, has never fallen below a base console to this day, despite every media outlet and every journalist, everything, always saying that it will take years for a top-end gaming PC to come close to those consoles at the time. Now, don't get me wrong, like I said, you're going to see some significant improvements in both frame rates, resolution, and visual quality and fidelity. But just don't listen to the hype men. They're paid to be hype men for a reason. Most of them haven't a fucking clue what they're talking about. You're looking at a guy with a significant amount of experience and history in PC hardware here. Look at everything I've said about the Xbox One family, the Xbox 360 family, the PS3 family, the PS4 family. You see my point.
Well, why are you boring me? I'm right.
I do think it's interesting that there's going to be some type of basic ray tracing involved, which kind of leads me to believe that when AMD actually release Navi-based GPUs for PCs, that it's going to have some proprietary entry-level ray tracing ability. Probably proprietary for AMD, because I think it's still too big of a performance hog if they just use the kind of generic Windows DirectX based one. DXR as they call it. Next up, we'll move on to the VR side of it. There's not much that we know about this. They just announced that VR will be supported, existing headset will be supported. But at the same time, because of how all this works, which we'll get to at the end of this video because of the last topic, I do think we'll see existing PS4 VR games work better. They might not run better. I don't know how they're programmed with the likes of dynamic resolutions and whatnot. But I do think we'll see more stable games, more stable frame rates. But this next point I want to talk about is huge. Now, this is nothing new for you PC gamers out there because, well, we've been using SSDs for, I don't know, about 6 years at this point. They've been mainstream. And SSDs are absolutely crazy. Now, when it comes to using SSDs on current hardware, stuff that's not properly optimized and programmed for SSD transmission speeds, you do see a benefit, there's no doubt about it, if you put an SSD in a PS4 Pro. But because of the rest of the hardware and how everything is designed, both from a hardware and software level, you don't get the full benefit. Sure, your games will load a bit faster, but they're not going to load properly. They hit CPU bottlenecks all over the place, especially with what's in these consoles. But the PS5 will be using SSD. I've seen multiple different reports on this. Some of them will say a 256 gig SSD, which is far too small, and I do not believe will be included, mainly because when you look at the size of the PS4 OS, as well as the size of any decent modern era PS4 game, you'd fit like 4 of them on there if you're lucky. So honestly, I do think there will be minimum 500 gig, but I think we're looking roughly around 1 terabyte of solid state storage. Now, just to give you guys an example out there, Mark Cerny used this as a demo when they were talking to the journalists about this. He booted up Spider-Man on the PS4 Pro, he did a quick fast travel section, and it took 18 seconds to load. That's right, 18 seconds to load. Now, you're probably thinking, as console gamers out there, that's not too bad, that's normal, that's the kind of thing here. But when he booted up the PS5 dev kit, and he did the same thing with a solid state drive, that whole fast travel scenario took 0.8 seconds. That is almost 20 times faster. I know that's blowing your mind out there, which is technically true and technically accurate, but you guys have not properly experienced this. Let me give you a quick example. Just the other day I streamed some Doom 2016, completely maxed out on my computer at 1080p 60 frames per second stream, while running at 1440p 120 to 180 frames per second. And my computer is nothing but solid state drives. All my drives are solid state. They were top end SSDs when I bought them in 2016, 2017. And Doom, a game which is supposedly up to several minutes of loading time on the consoles, loads for me in less than 5 seconds. You can go back and check that on stream if you don't believe me. It's the same with Fallout 4. Some friends of mine played Fallout 4 on their regular old consoles, and they were telling me that sometimes when booting the game up, during regular loading screens or whatever, some transition loading screens are up to a minute long. When they're booting the game and loading it up from the main menu, it can take loading times of up to 3 minutes. Now, I found this absolutely hilarious because for me, cold booting the game directly from the main menu for the first time takes me like 15 to 20 seconds. When I get a loading screen transition from, say, out in the wild into like a building or one of the towns or something like that, usually you're looking at less than 3 seconds. There's actually a meme out there because many of my PC games, not just me, but many PC gamers out there who have good PCs, specifically with solid state drives, there's a running meme between us all. The games load so fast that the tooltips and whatnot on the loading screens can't even be fully read because everything just loads so fast. So I do think you console guys out there are really going to see the benefit. You will absolutely be blown away by what a properly designed console with an SSD from a software and hardware level can do. The difference will be huge. When coupled with that CPU and what's probably going to be that GPU as well as the SSD, it's going to be wonders for you guys out there. But I will say there is one problem, one huge problem with the PS5 using an SSD. SSDs, at least big SSDs, are expensive. A good 1TB SSD, and no, I'm not talking about some crappy Samsung Evo 850, damn normie SSDs,
Why you boring me? I'm right.
But a good 1TB SSD will set you back the cost of a PS4 Pro. Now granted, those are retail prices, online retail prices at that. But either way, even buying a significant amount of them at cost, it does lead me to believe that this console is going to be expensive. If they do launch it with a 1TB drive of a SSD storage, granted they don't need a top-end drive, they can use probably like hell, they can even use a low-end 1TB drive. The speed is still that damn good. I still think with everything in here, we're going to see a console probably at $500 or €500. I don't think this is going to come out at the 400 mark. But anyway, back to the rest of the points I want to talk about in the video. They've said 8K resolution will be supported because of the CPU, the GPU, and the SSD. However, I think this is, well, technically true, but I still think it's going to be a bit of a false marketing gimmick. I think 8K will properly be supported the same way 4K is supported, if you will, with the PS4 Pro and Xbox One. It will output a 4K signal, but your games will render at a lower resolution and it'll be checkerboarded up or using some type of technique. Things like the PS5 dashboard will of course run at native 8K if you wish, but it really just strikes me as a marketing gimmick. And last up we have PS4 backwards compatibility. This is something I already called, just like many of the things in this video actually. And the PS5 will have PS4 backwards compatibility. I know a lot of people out there are kind of upset that it's not going to be PS1, PS2 and PS3 backwards compatibility as well. But this makes perfect sense. Like I explained in a video before about backwards compatibility on the PS4/PS5, because they all use the same type of architecture, It works just like a PC. You plop in the newer hardware, it's the same architecture, it just runs and has better compatibility, can take advantage of the better power, performance, etc. Because it's all the same type of hardware, the same type of architecture. Now this also makes me believe, will we see better performance in backwards compatible games? If you have a game that's capped at 30 FPS, but doesn't consistently keep that frame rate, will it use and take advantage of the extra hardware to get you that better frame rate? In games with an unlocked 60 FPS cap, will it take advantage of all this to keep 60 FPS a lot better? Or games with dynamic resolution, will they run higher consistently because of all the extra performance in here? Regardless of all of that, as long as the proper digital downloads are supported as well as physical media, PS4 backwards compatibility is a fantastic thing. There's almost 100 million PS4s out there, so naturally everyone is going to have a fuckload of games that they still want to play. Especially, it's very handy in the early years of a generation. True next-gen games aren't properly on the horizon at that point, and companies are still fairly slow and fairly shy at making next-gen exclusive games. So launching with this feature, hopefully it launches with it at least anyway, will allow people to fill in the gaps with the games they know and love, already play, or have in their backlog, that they can finally get around to it. Maybe with better visuals, better performance, better whatever. But that's it anyway. We've explained the whole situation. We've done a little bit of a deep dive into it. Overall, I think this is very good news. It does look like that they won't be completely anemic like the previous consoles. Because frankly, the PS4 and Xbox One were absolutely laughable when they came out, and they just got worse as time went by. At least this looks to be good. Ryzen, in any way, shape or form, is a properly, perfectly capable and competent modern era CPU I should say. I'm hoping the Navi based one is going to be somewhat capable. Granted, it is a custom one. Those words always scare me when it comes to GPUs for consoles. As well as the fact that AMD aren't really, truly, properly bleeding edge competitive, so I'm hoping they can do something from there. After all, having a custom Navi GPU means nothing if Navi in general is meh and you have a custom entry level one. But anyway, we can't know that for sure just yet until one, Navi stuff starts coming out and gets benchmarked on PC, and then we find out the specs of the PS5 GPU, even if it is custom, and use it as a comparison. The VR thing is good news for everyone out there who's interested and invested in VR. Granted, I have no interest in the PS4 VR, but I've been getting back into my Oculus Rift lately, which I've been kinda happy about. Hopefully I want to see how that gets going further down the line. The SSD is completely game changing for those of you out there who are just kind of console only gamers. And I can't wait to see how everyone in the console space is blown away by an SSD that isn't hamstrung by CPU and bandwidth limitations. 8K, well, we'll see about that, but PS4 backwards compatibility is a great thing. It'll probably give me a reason to play the PS5 within the first maybe year or two, with the exception of the probably 1 or 2 PS5 games that I actually buy within that time frame. The first couple of years of a launch are very, very rough. But anyway, that's it. Let me know in the comments section below, how hyped or excited are you for the PlayStation 5? Does everything we talked about in this video, do you have any worries, any concerns, any questions, or are you just completely blown away? Does this tickle your fancy? Are you really worried that it's going to launch at maybe €600, $600, whatever it is? Because a lot of this stuff does not come cheap. Maybe they sell it at a loss just to get it into as many homes as possible, but we'll see. When do you think it's going to come out? My money's on Christmas 2020. But anyway, let me know all of that good stuff in the comments section below. Hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video. And while you're at it, why not head on over and hit the subscribe button and even ring the little notification bell. Granted, getting a notification from YouTube in current year about a video upload or a live stream, whatever, is a whole other story. But hey, at least you can say you tried, am I right? As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the rest of the videos in my channel.